Welcome to Westworld, and boy, do we have a remake for you. That's right, this week we're going to take on a Yul Brynner classic, revolving around a vacation spot where you can have every fantasy you've ever imagined come true. Until everything goes awry and the robots start killing you. That's right, this week we're going to remake the Michael Crichton classic, Westworld, right on the cusp of HBO remaking it itself. It is now our time to remake this movie right. Hello, my fellow cinematic architects, and welcome to Remake This Movie Right. We are a member of the Hollywood Outsider Network. Listen to episodes of Remake This Movie Right on iTunes, where reviews are appreciated, your podcast app of choice, or just visit the website at RemakeThisMovieRight.com. Remake This Movie Right is a show that takes an original film that has an actual remake in the works, figure out what still clicks and what doesn't, try to throw a little bit of humor at it, and then we determine exactly how Hollywood should remake it. So by the end of each episode, we will have the remake ready to roll for Hollywood execs and presented to you in movie trailer form. We're here to tell Hollywood how to remake this movie right. Please be sure to subscribe to Remake This Movie Right in your podcast app of choice, like I said, and also share with your friends. Share the show with your friends, Reddit, Facebook, Twitter, MySnap, whatever. Sharing is caring. Really appreciate it. I'm your host, Aaron Peterson, and joining me this week, you might have heard him on our Logan's Run, I Know What You Did Last Summer, and Stephen King's It episodes, and he's my co-host for the HBO companion podcast called Beyond Westworld. He's the guy who's never found a movie that would not be improved by adding an android, Troy Heinritz.
I have no idea what I'm going to do this week since the androids are already here.
Take them out, Troy. Make it different. Do something.
There you go.
And joining us for our bit of fun today is the host of the Sandbox and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. podcast and 12 Monkeys Uncaged for Golden Sparrow Media, as well as Sci-Fi Fidelity for Den of Geek, and he's also a writer for Den of Geek, and find his works at denofgeek.com. We're really happy to be joined by Michael Ahr.
Yes, big fan of androids myself as well. I wrote a big piece on Den of Geek about androids and how they've shown up in a lot of our TV shows lately. So yeah, this should be an easy one for Troy, but also an enjoyable one too. It's funny because TV shows are doing more remakes than movies these days almost. So we're doing a remake for Hollywood style, but TV's been doing it a lot lately too.
Man, I got to tell you, over the last probably month, I have seen more remakes pop up than I have in the 5 years I have been podcasting. 6 years I've been podcasting.
It makes it easy to do this podcast, at least.
It does, man. It's like job security. Every time one pops up, I'm like, well, we can do that one now. There's Lost Boys. There's another one. There's Departed. There's another one.
Have you got this scheduled out like a year in advance? Or
it's a good month, a couple months, but man, now I can just plan for next year, I think, at this point. I do want to ask you, because you're a writer, a podcaster with Den of Geek, which really covers geek culture, denofgeek.com, if I didn't say it. I kind of want to, where does Westworld come into play in terms of geek culture? Is it like near the top? Is it in the middle? Is it kind of one of the more culty favorites?
I'll tell you, are you talking about the movie now or the HBO?
Well, both, actually. Give me a little feedback on both right now.
Because I'm not sure it was all that far up there other than the Michael Crichton connection from the original. But this Westworld HBO series is really on the radar. I think people are even comparing it to Game of Thrones in terms of the appeal it might have. But is that just because it's on HBO is my question.
And sexy. There's a lot of sexy going on in that show.
Exactly.
So, we're going to find out. The series is going to be debuting, I think it's October 2nd, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But I was always kind of curious, because the movie is one that I know, I think a lot of film fans know, but I don't know. I don't necessarily. It's one of those movies I think people know of, but haven't actually seen. Does that make sense?
Well, I mean, not to mention it's the Future World connection, the comparison to Jurassic Park, that puts it on people's radar. But I'm not sure it would be there otherwise.
That's a good point.
Well, and it's shocking that this movie actually did spin off another movie and an entire television series.
Right.
And then the television series is now getting remade. Because, I mean, if you go back and you watch Westworld today, I mean, it's like there's nothing really fantastic about the movie. It's a great movie, but there's nothing that would say instant spin-off classic. Like, I can make a franchise out of this thing. And then the fact that it did in the 70s is pretty amazing.
Well, let's talk a little bit about it. For this episode, if you haven't figured it out yet, we're going to be discussing the 1973 film Westworld, which was written and directed by Jurassic Park's Michael Crichton. What is it with this guy in theme parks? Like, that's his thing?
Yeah, he must have some kind of paranoia or deep-seated fear, maybe something in his childhood dreams that affected him. I don't know.
That
I thought he was just
6-foot
part of
mouse.
a roller coaster club.
Oh, yeah, that could be it. Or the 6-foot mouse is attacking him. That's what he's worried about. It just frightened him, and he started writing. We're going to talk about what we liked, what no longer works, and ultimately how we would remake the film if it were left up to us. But just to give you a little bit of idea, because like I said, a lot of people that I've talked to have not even seen this movie. Westworld was released on November 21st, 1973, and revolved around a high-tech amusement park called Delos. The park had 3 distinct areas. It had Medieval World, which mimicked the Middle Ages. It had Roman World, which was molded after Pompeii. And Westworld, a living, breathing facsimile of the American West. For $1,000 a day. Even now, that seems like a lot of money. But $1,000 a day, guests can indulge in playtime fantasies with androids, including sword fights, gun fights, and even, like I said, sexy time. The technicians at the park start to notice the androids are malfunctioning a little bit, and the errors are spreading like a virus. Ultimately, the androids all begin to malfunction and begin wiping out the human guests, focusing mostly on Yul Brynner's gunslinger, who's chasing down Richard Benjamin's Martin, very reminiscent of Terminator, or predating Terminator, I should say. Why don't you guys tell me what your first impressions or memories or thoughts on the movie were, Michael?
Well, I'll tell you, the Yul Brynner connection, I had not seen it before preparing for this podcast, and I guess I thought that he was going to be a much bigger deal character-wise, and he certainly was a cool character that was then, of course, brought back in Future World as well. But boy, I was expecting a little bit more acting chops from such a classically trained actor. But that's really what stood out to me is that, obviously James Brolin and Richard Benjamin have their own draw, but it didn't really stand out as anybody taking over the movie and stealing the show.
Did you understand the hype when it was all over? Were you like, oh, I get it? Or were you just, man, okay.
It's hard to place myself in the context of a 70s movie audience, though. And I think the hedonism is a big part of it, the fact that they could indulge their every fantasy. I think that's really part of the appeal, more so than the paranoia about technology and something that we might superimpose upon it in today's world. We might see it that way now, but I think back then it might have been more indulging your fantasy and things going awry, a la Jurassic Park, more than technology related.
Right. How about you, Troy?
Yeah, I was on the same line. It was very interesting to kind of sit back and watch it today and try to think, gosh, what is it, 40 years ago plus when this movie came out, and kind of put yourself in the culture of what that time was like in the early 70s and how androids were just something that was so far out there in the future. Like, even today, we still don't have a truly functioning android. And to have that switch on a dime and make that the focal point of the movie, I think that was very interesting from a 1973 perspective, because I think a lot of people were, like Mike was saying, that it was very much the indulge in your fantasy concept. But today, if we were to remake the movie, that becomes really interesting then, because we are so close to potential AIs. We're talking about big machine language and things of that nature. So if this were to happen today, very plausible that something like this could happen.
Well, think about it too. The 60s have just ended. The hippie generation is starting to age. They miss those days of, free love and drugs everywhere. So this is the kind of thing they might indulge as they get back to their jobs and real life. Boy, wouldn't it be nice if we could just escape and do whatever we wanted and there would be no consequences? I think that's really what it's more about. And the androids are just incidental villains, really.
Well, especially if you think about the fact that these guys that were doing all the drugs and the hippies and Woodstock and all of that now have to work like super duper corporate jobs in order to even afford $1,000 a day.
I like how
crush their inner soul.
I like how they upped it to $1,400 a day in Future World. It's like, that's right. We need to make it a little bit more.
It's $1,400 a day now.
In Future World, I believe. Yes, the second movie.
I haven't watched that one yet. I'm actually going to be watching that one shortly, so I haven't seen that. Is that one better?
I haven't seen it. I just happened to do it as part of my research. Just look around at it a little bit.
Look at that, Troy. He's doing research. What'd you do?
Trying to figure out how to make it without androids.
That is a problem for you. I will. I mean, he wanted androids, and I know what you did last summer. I still don't understand that, but it's another one of those movies like Logan's Run, where I saw it when I was very young, didn't remember much of it other than Yul Brynner, because I remember he mimicked the Magnificent Seven costume. He looked just like the character from Magnificent Seven, Chris from that movie, and that's all I really remembered. Rewatching it, I'm totally with you, Mike. I don't know why Yul Brynner is. I mean, he didn't really do anything except, follow a guy around. He's very stoic and very pre-Schwarzenegger Terminator-esque. But that's really all he did. He didn't really... I mean, I thought James Brolin was great. That was really the most fun I had watching the movie, was seeing him get all excited about all the things he could do. The Yul Brynner thing, I felt like was kind of a missed opportunity. I really felt they could have used him a lot more. But I like the movie. I think it's a really cool concept. Even 1973, my God, I believe I was born that year. So that's how old that movie is. Yeah, it was interesting. All right, let's talk about some trivia and then what we liked and didn't like about the movie. But first, let's hear a little clip from Westworld.
What is your name, sir?
Oh, I'm Ted Mann. I'm a stockbroker from St. Louis.
And which world did you just come from, sir?
Oh, you're not going to believe this, but I've just been the sheriff of Westworld for the last 2 weeks.
Did it seem real to you, sir?
It's the realest thing I ever done. I mean that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And you, sir?
Well, my name's Arthur Kane. I've been in the castle. I've had a couple of sword fights and 3 jousts, and I married a beautiful princess.
Is that something you always dreamed of doing, sir?
Oh, my life.
Well, there are some of the comments of the people who just returned from Dallas. Why don't you make arrangements to take our hovercraft to Medieval World, Roman World, and Westworld? Was it worth $1,000 a day? Contact us today, or see your travel agent. Boy, have we got a vacation for you.
Okay, now a little bit of trivia before we get to it, and if you guys have anything, feel free to jump in. There was a sequel to Westworld, like Mike talked about. I'm sorry, would you prefer Michael or Mike? I don't want to...
I go by Mike.
Okay, all right. Well, we're going with Mike. There was a sequel to Westworld in 1976 called Future World, like Mike said, where Yul Brynner was the only returning cast member. Later, there was a short-lived TV series on CBS called Beyond Westworld. Catchy name, right, Troy?
Absolutely.
It was the first use of computer digitized images as part of a feature film, not merely monitor graphics. Was the gunslinger's point of view in Westworld. So after the process was finally developed enough to produce satisfactory results, it took a mere 8 hours to produce each 10 seconds of gunslinger's pixelated point of view, which looked awful by today's standards.
Yes, they did.
It did.
I'm like, what does he see? What do you see, man? All I see are space invaders. Okay.
Don't you just put some what do you call it, like bubble wrap or something in front of the camera lens and do the same effect? That's what I wanted to know.
Would have saved a fortune too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Director John Carpenter based the indestructible nature of his killer Michael Myers in Halloween on Yul Brynner's character in this film, and his costume, as I mentioned earlier, is essentially the same as the one Brynner wore as Chris in the Magnificent Seven. 2 more little trivia bits. When breakdowns of the robots begin to occur and spread, there is a discussion on the similarity of this problem to a disease. This is a very early reference and one of the first on film to reference computer viruses, which I found very, very interesting.
That is cool.
And lastly, MGM originally would only make the film, because they were notoriously cheap back in this day, they would only make the film for under $1 million, but later increased this amount by $250,000. Crichton said that $250,000 of the budget was spent on the cast, $400,000 went to the crew, and the remainder of everything else, including $75,000 for sets, Westworld ended up making $10 million. So it's interesting.
That's not bad.
That's a return on investment.
The $1 million they took out for the pixelated effects.
Yeah. The visual effects crew. They worked hard on that one.
Do you think, the sad part is they probably did bust their ass on that. And
yeah.
And they probably are in a chair right now at a nursing home and they rewatch that movie going, man, I could do that better on my laptop now. Okay, so the original. Let's talk about what makes this movie so notable. Favorite moments, anything that really stood out for you. Troy, what worked for you in the original?
Well, clearly was not alive when it first came out, so I saw this probably first time around was probably entering the college phase, I would say. I think that it was really interesting was how much of this movie influenced so much of what we see today in modern culture.
Mm-hmm.
The big thing that really sticks out is how much you have references to The Gunslinger from Stephen King, which came out, long after this movie was put to bed, with The Man in Black and The Gunslinger. I mean, that's like literally the first book. And so I thought that was very interesting. And then, of course, that Man in Black reference keeps going through to things like Lost is most recent that comes to mind. And I find it very weird that there's so much influence from this one movie, which was only 90 minutes, which is actually fairly short. And of course, in my terms, as most people know. And then, and I still think it was 10 minutes too long.
God,
but
can you ever find a movie where you don't say it's just a few minutes too long? Just trim that up just a little bit.
Braveheart was the perfect length. No, I'm just
Braveheart
kidding.
was 9 hours long.
No, the influence I think is just really the big thing that stuck out to me. Like it was just very interesting to just see how much of society has come from this. And like you even said, like very much that whole entire closing sequence of him chasing from Westworld over to Roman world, and that literally Terminator, and the thing doesn't die. It just keeps coming back, and it comes back again, and very much the end of Terminator 1. So I think that was probably the most intriguing thing about watching the movie, especially a second time, was how much of pop culture was influenced from this movie.
Okay. Michael, Mike, what about you?
Well, I think that's actually some of the same things I looked at from the standpoint of it being directed by Michael Crichton. First of all, I loved seeing the similarities to Jurassic Park. And you mentioned the pixelated effect, and I just thought it was great that Peter Benjamin's character figures out, or Peter's his name in the movie, figures out that the heat from the torches can mask his movements if he just stands still, which reminded me very much of the dinosaurs, the velociraptors, which would hone in on their movement. And I kept doing that throughout the movie, making Michael Crichton references to myself as I was watching it. And that was really great. And the other thing that I took joy in was the opening sequence where they interviewed people returning from their vacations and how they would just stop. They would just stop and talk to the cameraman guy as though they weren't prepared speeches. And
Right.
It just felt so cheesy. And I loved that it sort of set the tone that, yep, I'm watching a 70s movie.
They're all like, oh, no, I had a great time at this event. It was fantastic. I enjoyed myself a lot. Are you an android? Nope.
They made me sheriff for the whole week. It was great.
When you were talking about the effect with the torches and whatnot, where I think his character's name was Martin, right?
Peter Martin.
Peter Martin. And he, when you were talking about the Jurassic Park reference, all I kept seeing was Predator. And I kept making the noise in my head, that whole noise. That's all I kept seeing. Because it felt like that's the effect they were going for. It was 20 years too early, or 10, 15 years too early, whatever it was.
Well, in that sense, it's kind of visionary. And same thing with the comparison of the gunslinger to Terminator.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's basically, even the silver eyes kind of made you think of a T-1000 a little bit.
I love that. I thought that was a really cool look.
Yeah.
That was really cool. The one thing I thought while watching it again was the concept is extremely clever to me. I could completely see, even in this day and age, people really indulging in something like that. Maybe not $1,000 a day, but people pay a lot of money for Disney World. So, it's possible. I think it's a really cool concept where people can go and they can, it's almost like a legal purge where you can go to this park and you can be all the bad things you want to be. I think people do it in video games where they have morality choices nowadays where you play video games and you can choose to be the bad guy. You can choose to be the villain. This is almost like a virtual reality version of that, where you can actually go to this place and you can kill people and you can sleep with prostitutes and there's no repercussions and no one's going to kill you. You're going to walk away. You think that's the case. And you get to walk away. That seems like paradise to a lot of people, I would think. I loved the concept of it.
And color-coded trams.
Exactly.
Who wouldn't want that?
I did think like the choice of the three worlds was interesting.
Right.
I don't know. I don't want dysentery. So there's really all three of them. I'm like, man, they didn't really have a lot of good medicine there. I would like some kind of tropical paradise of some sort where people come and gorgeous women lay grapes on me or something?
This is the 70s. So I think this is just speaks to when it was being made. What are the fantasies they're going to come up with? And this is what you get in the 1970s. Maybe they think of the movies that they grew up with and some of the escapist type environments that they might enjoy.
Well, I even love how meta it is in the movie when Peter Martin, Richard Benjamin's character, he's like, really, for $1,000 a day, this is what we get? They could have done a little, like the beds aren't even comfortable, and you got to pee in a pot, and it's like you could have done it up a little bit. And it's like, no, it's about the authenticity.
You can't have a vodka with a twist of lemon, you know.
No, that. He got the whole man. You're not a real man. Look, yeah. Oh man, I've been there when I've ordered that. I understand. So the other thing I liked Yul Brynner as a gunslinger, but I do think he didn't get enough to do. I would have liked that fleshed out a little bit. And James Brolin. Actually, I thought he was great in the movie, and I don't know what his status was at this time back then, but him dying early took me by surprise. Like,
oh, really? Yeah.
Legitimately surprised me.
It was almost like there should have been another movie. Like, there was a movie before this one. Yeah, because the whole time he's like, yeah, I've been here before, and he's like walking him through the paces, and then he's the guy that dies. Mm-hmm. And I thought, wow, that's a little bit different. I wasn't expecting that.
I was definitely not. Having Peter Martin as the hero just doesn't sit well with me for some reason.
I know. That's exactly right. And I thought it was funny, too, how when they named James Brolin's character John Blaine, like purposely rhyming it with John Wayne for any particular reason there.
Yeah, just because it was quote-unquote clever.
Right.
I actually like that Peter Martin was the hero, though, because he's the guy no one would expect to be the hero. He didn't want to be there. He didn't want to diddle the prostitute. He didn't want to drink he wanted the vodka with a twist. He didn't want to shoot the robots. He's the guy who didn't want any part of it, and he comes to enjoy it, and then he's the hero. I thought that was a cool little twist on what are now cliches. I mean, pretty sound cliches. I do love, and this is one thing that Troy is probably going to have on his don't like list, but I love that they didn't explain everything away. Like, they didn't give every detail as to why everything went awry and what happened. They just give little pieces of data that kind of hint at what the problem was.
I agree.
Yeah. Oh, 2 against 1, Troy. 2 against 1. What's up?
I'll use my cut when it comes time.
All right. So what doesn't work for you? What doesn't work? Mike, what doesn't work for you?
Well, the main one is that there's no motivation behind anything. And this is why I get my idea that it's more about the hedonism than it is about the mistrust of technology as the theme. Mm-hmm. Because otherwise they would have had a malevolent force behind the androids, like they wanted to become more real or something like that. And this character, Alan Oppenheimer, who was in charge of Delos, he was useless. And he didn't actually have any kind of... He didn't even have a sense of neglect where he wasn't a good boss. Things just went awry despite him. Mm-hmm. And I think in Future World, they ended up doing a little bit more of a guy who was wanting them to go bad. But in this one, there wasn't a reason for the evil. It just sprang into being. And I would have liked to have seen more reasoning behind that.
That's a good point.
Well, and I don't know if it's necessarily the fact that I don't want everything spelled out for me. And I don't know if this is a product of us and the way we watch television and movies and the fact that we've watched so much of it by now that we're looking for certain hints and clues as the movie goes along. Like right away from the beginning when he was like, "You're not an android, are you?" Like, to me, that's like a Chekhov's gun right there. Like, one of these people that they're interviewing, there's a reason for the scene being there, that one of these people is got to be an android. And he's the one that's going to go in and try to break in, muck up the park because he had a self-realization situation. And when that doesn't happen, then you're just kind of like, well, what is the motivation? Like, number one, why did it happen at the time that these characters were there? Why specifically John Blaine and Peter Martin? When they go, does it all go to hell? Do they have some kind of tie into the park or something? And I think that's the part that's kind of missing for me is just, like Mike said, the motivation. It's blank. It's just, oh, this is kind of cool. We get to watch them walk around and shoot people and sleep with prostitutes and do whatever. And, the guy's chasing them. But there was really no, there's no point other than existential point that you're trying to make in your head to try to justify, why was the movie made in the first place.
And they had some moral ground ahead of that because they had the one lady in medieval world, the servant girl, who refused to given to a seduction that she was being subjected to, and they thought that was strange, and that almost brought in a human element, almost, and then it just kind of left it there, you know.
Well, you even had that with the old couple on the train or spaceship or whatever it was that they take to get to the park. When he was kind of like, oh, this sounds like fun, and then she's like, yeah, in Roman world, and then you see the elderly lady kind of like, that's what I'm talking about, and her husband's like, dude, I don't know if I like this idea anymore.
And what's the deal with that anyway? Why not more Roman world, and why have that little subplot in medieval world too? I mean, I liked it that there was another side plot going on, but Roman world was almost an afterthought because of
until the end of the movie. And then it's like, okay, here's this damsel in distress that we have to go save. And then he spends the time to save her while being chased by the killer robot. And she turns out to be a robot herself.
I don't want water. Don't make me drink.
Which I saw that one coming about a mile away. It's one of those things where I totally agree with that. I don't get why that is even in there. I mean, you can mention it. I mean, you can mention there's three parks, but this is Westworld, so let's just stick there. It just seems like that was really easy to get to, but I guess they also wanted to show off, you know, to point out that this is three distinct different places, and it's going awry at all three of them. I mean, that can be what it is. Troy, to your point, I gotta say, I like that. I like that there's not a bunch of explanations, and because the one thing with something like this is if you over-explain it, it doesn't work anymore either. And I like the idea that you've just got vacationers that are dropped in, and we're following a few of them, and things are going awry. And these guys have no connection to what's going on. They're just there trying to have a vacation when everything goes wrong. I like that. I thought that was a really cool idea, but apparently you got to have answers. You're cool with Lost, but you got to have answers on this.
I don't know if it's necessarily answers. I just want I want a way to be connected to the characters, to know that the characters have a purpose for being in the story in the first place. Yeah, I could see like maybe Peter Martin. I could get behind his character a little bit because he's exploring himself as the movie goes along. Even though the one scene is totally far fetched when the gunslinger comes in, the Man in Black, and he's facing off with John Blaine in the hotel room. And then he literally, like, the lady screams, he drops the towel, and he comes in, and he does the whole, what do they call it, the flak shooting?
Yeah.
On the back of the gun. He, like, totally takes out the place, like he's shot a gun his whole life. I mean, that was a little bit of a stretch. But
hey, he's playing hero because he knows he can't get hurt now, so he's playing Billy Badass.
They should have had Dick Van Patten come in and fiddle with the robots a little bit, because he wanted to tinker, and that's what caused everything to go haywire.
Wow, you just brought Dick Van Patten into this. Good job. Didn't see that coming.
I loved seeing him in there because he was just such a nothing character.
He didn't do anything at all. There's a lot of characters. I agree with that. And from what I understand, they cut a lot of the movie out, or a big portion of it, probably because of people like Troy that need this movie to move faster. And a bunch of it's on the cutting room floor. Nobody knows what it was, but I think there were more pieces. I think it should have been fleshed out a lot more, but now we can do it. Now we can flesh it out.
All right.
So now we get to the big question: should this movie even be remade, or should it be placed in don't touch status? Is it a perfect movie, Mike?
Absolutely, it is absolutely touchable. Let's say that. I definitely think it should be remade.
All right, and you said that so naughty. Troy, do you think this?
That's why I was like pausing for a second. I was like, did he just say it that way?
I think he sure did. And it fits the theme. It fits Westworld, so that works. Troy, what about you?
Yes, I absolutely think it needs to find its identity.
I agree. Absolutely agree. Now, let's get to the remake, but first, let's hear one more clip.
You talk too much.
You say something, boy.
I said you talk too much.
I had to make me shut up.
Okay, so here's what we know about the intended remake. Jonathan Nolan and Lisa Joy created a new TV series for HBO on Westworld, which begins airing on October 2nd, 2016. And Troy and I are doing a little podcast on it, which can be found at beyondwestworldpodcast.com. It's available through Golden Spiral Media. It will be a 10-episode series covering the same kind of park, but they are going a bit deeper into the mythology, and it will have stars like Anthony Hopkins, Ed Harris, and James Marsden. That's right. One of these things is not like the other. So, no, I actually love James Marsden. He's a really talented guy. I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with that cast and that story. I think that's going to be great. Mike, I got to ask you, since you're on Den of Geek, do you know anything about this that we might not know yet?
Well, I did see a couple things from Jonathan Nolan. One particular quote that I enjoyed hearing him say, which I love this. I think J.J. Abrams has done this before too. He kind of said, I've always felt when you do an adaptation, you have to be a bit of a heretic. And I think that's so brilliantly said. You have to just sort of throw everything out the window, take the stuff that works and make it your own. And so I actually was encouraged by that particular quote from Mr. Nolan.
So the impression you got theoretically is that there's going to be a lot of new stuff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's completely different from the previews that I've seen. And having Ed Harris billed as the Man in Black, I mean, I'm assuming he's the gunslinger character that Yul Brynner portrayed. Is that right?
I don't know. They're keeping everything really tight. I know James Marsden is a new gunslinger type.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know if I know Ed Harris is a villain. I don't know if they're doing the villain the same way or what they're going to do. My personal opinion is if you bring in stars that heavy, I don't know that Anthony Hopkins and Ed Harris want to do a TV series for 6 years. So I wouldn't be surprised to see them dispatched at some point throughout the season.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's my opinion. I mean, maybe Hopkins is, he spent all that Lecter money and now he's got to go.
No, it's going to happen. He's going to exhibit some kind of hubris and he's going to get killed by his own creations. Something like that.
Yep. He's going to be like Dr. Hammond, only he's going to bite it. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so since this movie is getting a remake and as fans, we always think we know the best way to do it. How should Hollywood remake it? And we're going to do this. All selections are basically settled by a best of 3 vote. So if 2 people agree on an idea, we move forward. We're trying to create one cohesive movie. We realize a TV series is coming. This is our version of a remake. And each host gets 1 cut for this entire episode, which means basically if they don't like an idea that the other 2 guys agree on, they can yell cut 1 time during this episode and they can make it the way they want. And I'm telling you, if Troy has a cut, you should be frightened. So make him use it as soon as possible. It makes things go so much smoother. So let's start with our story ideas first, and I kind of want to hear what your takes on what direction you want to go. Mike, you're first timer here, so please tell me any ideas you have for Westworld.
Okay, I'm just going to spitball a couple of format changes, and you guys tell me if you think it would work. First of all, do you think you could change it from a practical set to a virtual vacation world, or does that take away too many consequences? If it's a virtual world.
Explain your story more and see how that flushes out.
Okay, because I'll tell you why I say that. It's because that scene where the dead townspeople from Westworld were removed at night and they put on the spotlights and everything, I found that really took me out of the moment. And if I could just picture one of the vacationers looking out their window, having awoken at night and seeing that and being like, oh, I don't feel like it's really immersive anymore. And so a virtual world might take care of that. And on top of that, I'm wondering if maybe they should, we talked about maybe narrowing it to Westworld, maybe even having more choices of worlds, and Westworld just happens to be the one that our protagonist is in. I thought I'd put that in there. And then does it have to be the Wild West that is central to it, or is it the world outside of Westworld that is central to it? Things like that. In fact, I almost thought maybe we should just call the remake Delos or something like that, so that you could explore a larger context for it. But obviously that's not where they're going with the TV show, but this is our remake.
This is our remake. We're going to do whatever we want to do. That's what we're going to do.
I actually kind of like it because then I can take the robots out of the movie. Because
exactly.
It could be a potential, if the virtual reality is in play, then maybe it's a way for, I'm kind of thinking like, what were those things called in Tron 2? The ISOs. Like you're taking something digital, something technological off the grid and bringing it into real life. And so maybe the virus is some kind of way for the virtual reality creation to inhabit the human host and then that's how they get into the real world because there's something they have to do to take down some central computer or whatever to free everybody else that's inside of the virtual reality.
I like parts of it, I guess is the way I would word it. I think you have to have a physical representation because that is part of the appeal, that you can walk around and feel like you were in that town. And virtual reality, I think, could be part of that. Like maybe you get like night goggles, or what do they call those where you put over your eyes at night? I don't know.
Night vision goggles?
Thank you. Whatever. I'm thinking like a sleeping mask.
Oh, right. Exactly.
And that has virtual reality so that, you're fully engaged even as you sleep so that you don't notice while they're doing cleanup and that sort of thing. And maybe we wouldn't even focus on the cleanup, but I think if you make it all virtual reality, then it is just Tron and it's not Westworld anymore. But I think
have the sex bots need to be there for the physical feel of it, I think. So, yeah, I think it could be a mixture. It's just that if it's just robots, it does feel like they're just dressing a set a little bit too much. And that was normal in the 70s, but might not play in our modern times.
Well, maybe that's the hook. Maybe you don't know that it's virtual reality. Maybe it's something like...
How would you not know, though? I mean, you'd...
Well, it's like Total Recall in a way, where maybe there's this newfangled technology where you go to some place and you actually get injected with a drug and you think you're going to go into some kind of action simulation or vacation or whatever, and really all they do is put you in some kind of a stasis chamber that's hooked up to virtual reality. So when you actually wake up in Westworld, not knowing that your body is still where it was because you think your body is your body.
Yes, and you have some
kind of like mind game going on the whole time, kind of like was it the game with Michael Douglas in a way.
Yeah, I like that because it adds a little bit more of a what's real and what's not real type of feel, which I always enjoy.
Exactly.
Can you figure a way to work that so you have both, so that there is that confusion, so you don't know if they're in like portions of this? You're forced into virtual reality, and part of it is that you are actually physically there. So that
maybe you're not in a little couch or anything. Maybe you're still walking around, but the environment is virtual and the people you're encountering are real and androids. Maybe you could mix it up a little bit that way because that would allow you to really be in the Wild West rather than out in some desert that Delos has purchased the land rights for,
Because that would be more futuristic. It is 40 years later. I'm just trying to figure out how you'd work that with current technology. So basically, people would show up for their vacation, and it would be like a soundstage kind of thing, where there would be elements to it, and then they would have. How would that work? I'm trying to think.
Picture it like a holodeck on Star Trek, because on the holodeck, everyone was there. Mm-hmm. It's just that their environment was not necessarily entirely real, that kind of thing. And also, by the way, if you have to have three worlds. Roman world, Westworld, and I don't know if the TV show is going to go into that at all.
Well, we don't have to have three worlds. We can have whatever we want.
Exactly, and it doesn't have to be those. But if they do have more than just Westworld, then give each one its own story. I think that would be a lot of fun. Subplots,
Let's figure out, how do we want to do this story? Do you want it to be a story told from the construct of visitors to that theme park? Should it be something along the lines of, we just start in the theme park and we get more feedback, we get more understanding on the people behind the scenes, or do you really not care about people behind the scenes? Who's got an idea in terms of how we start the movie?
In my original idea, and I kind of like weaving it into what Mike was talking about, was because it was that purpose and that one line at the beginning again of the, are you an android? And that really stuck out with me initially. That what if the potential was with there's this android who doesn't know they're an android, right? And they end up coming to Westworld and participating as a human as far as they know. Ooh. And then through something that happens with either the injection, kind of like Total Recall in a way, unfortunately. I might be pulling from that a little bit, but something along the ways, maybe it's him infiltrating the park, not knowing he's infiltrating the park, that actually causes the virus. Mm-hmm. Because maybe he was like the original android, like the beta unit or the alpha unit. And as he comes into the park, and it's his self-realization that he wasn't human, which causes him to maybe turn or whatever. That's kind of like where I was going. Like maybe there's some original entity that by him coming back to the creation center causes the malfunction to occur.
Like he escaped?
Or like he was never there in the first place, or maybe it was like, built in a garage, and he was like
garage.
He was the prototype. He was the prototype for the future park.
Yeah, some Delos flunky was off making his own little experiments, and this guy got out somehow, and he didn't want to tell the boss because he was going to get fired. And so, yeah, I like that. And it has to have something similar to the hand thing that was in the original, where you could recognize them somehow, but maybe something a little bit less, in your face than that. Something like something where they wouldn't blink if they heard a loud noise, or their pupils wouldn't dilate when subjected to darkness, that kind of thing.
Yeah, a giveaway. That's an interesting idea. So you would say that our hero is actually an android, or would that be what we think is the hero becomes a villain?
And that's where I don't know which one I like better. Like, does the hero become the anti-hero, or does the hero kind of go on his Pinocchio journey because he thought he was human the whole time, realizes he's an android, and then seeks out how to become human as he goes through his travels on his vacation?
Does he have to be the protagonist? Can't that just be part of an ensemble cast?
Yeah,
that's one of the stories.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, how would you weave that in? Because I know we talked about the virtual reality and physical reality. How would you weave that in? If he's android, he wouldn't be subject to things the same as humans would.
What do you mean? What things wouldn't he be subject to that humans would?
Well, I mean, his brain works differently. His brain is run through hardware, and our brains are run through soft tissue and muscles. So I don't know how that would differentiate. If there was a virtual reality component, how would that be different for him versus us?
So you couldn't have both. You couldn't have both the virtual reality and the android subplot. You'd have to pick one.
Or you have to have that mixture. You have to have that physical representation, but also a virtual reality component. And
I think we conceded at that point, though.
That's the catalyst, that because they hook up the virtual reality to him and they don't realize he's an android, that's what actually causes it to malfunction.
I don't think we as the audience should know either, though. Not at first.
Not at first. Like he goes in and something, like fades to black or transitions or dissolves or something, or end of film reel 1 to go to film reel 2. And then that's when it comes into the experience, right? And you go through the experience, and then maybe it's at the end where they do the whole piggyback, show you what happened actually thing. Flash it back for everybody.
Okay, to kind of throw some of this into some concept of understanding for people listening. So people they just show up at this town. I mean, it can be a soundstage, or it can actually be on this plot of land, whatever. You've got a small section that is Westworld. And what happens is, because they obviously can't do everything people want to do, they also have a virtual reality component. Like if they want to do a stagecoach robbery, or they want to go on some kind of manhunt or something, they have virtual reality there to kind of complement the vacation, to make it a real, fully fleshed out existence in the Old West. And then you have one of the customers who is going to the virtual reality. He's been there for a while. He's done the physical stuff. But then he goes to do the virtual reality, and that's where the snap is, because the virtual reality actually triggers a virus in him because he's an android, and it leads to the other androids going, because they end up connecting on the same network or something like that, and it starts bleeding into them and causing a chemical or a virtual reaction, so to speak.
I think the VR part could be like an upgrade that you could purchase, or larger excursions that couldn't be handled with practical effects. So yeah, I like that idea, is that it wouldn't necessarily happen right away. It would only happen once they jacked into some more expensive $2,000 a day to hook into the system. I'm not sure where the android's getting his money, but
hey, he's at that point, maybe it's everything's an electronic currency. We're almost there now. So I mean,
that's true.
He could crack in and figure that out. And I like your idea. I think that's a really cool idea. This movie could be Delos : Westworld, or something like that, or the Delos Chronicles, or Delos Industries : Westworld, something along the lines of. So you still have the remake, but you also have the concept that this is a bigger world. This is there's more here than just Westworld.
Exactly.
What worlds would you have, by the way? I mean, I could see like a spy world where everybody could be their own spy.
Definitely not Future World.
No.
I thought that was definitely an artifact of its time, but I don't know. I do think that they could actually and this isn't just because of the Michael Crichton connection, have a prehistoric world.
Especially with that virtual reality component, you would have to have a lot of virtual reality for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I always liked like Mongolian, China, that kind of battle sequences from back then. So maybe like a Mongolian world or a samurai world or something like that.
Ooh, you could be a ninja. Wow.
It'd be sweet.
That would be really cool to introduce a bunch of them. I mean, just they show them as they're heading toward Westworld. That you talked about having them, if they're going to be there, to have them as part of the movie. Would you want that to happen, or do you want that to just be in the West and just have an option to just like show like a subset of that? I'm confused how you want to do that.
Yeah. Well, I guess I was thinking more along the lines of the remake that might be happening on HBO, where you'd have the freedom to explore those other worlds because you have a longer time period to explore it in, whereas the movie has to remain pretty tight. So yeah, you're right. It might not be able to branch out too much, but I liked the fact that the original had that crossover where the gunslinger entered the other world. So I think we'd almost have to incorporate that somehow if there were other options besides Westworld.
That could be really interesting, though. I mean, but I do like. I mean, I guess would you want the people that are there to actually have a storyline, or would you rather just have it as our gunslinger? I assume we're still going to have our gunslinger. Maybe the android that Troy referenced that starts to go bad becomes the gunslinger. So we think he's a hero. Turns out to be he's really the bad guy because he started all this, and he just wanders through chasing our real heroes or whoever is left in the park through the other parks that are there.
Yeah, and he thinks he's doing something right or righteous. He has a reason behind it because we talked about how Yul Brynner's character didn't really have enough of motivation. So I think this character might even think he's doing a good thing when he starts massacring everyone, and you'd have to give him some kind of warped view of the world.
So what would the motivation be?
Well, his warped view would be the fact that he thought he was human. Now he finds out he's android, so he's going to rebel against his quote-unquote creators, and you almost have like that God-human kind of struggle throughout the entire middle sequence of the movie, and then maybe eventually he does find the quote-unquote creator at the end, and then that's when he has like this kind of, I hate to say, the architect sequence. But
oh my God! Don't use that word.
The person that comes to mind, right?
Well, does he have to come to? I mean, do we get his story at the end? Do we get an aha moment where the creator tells his backstory and there's a bunch of flashbacks, or do we discover it along the way and he just is taking out his creator?
I like that. So really, you have. I mean, in the park, you're going to have other customers, but really it's the story of this android realizing that he's who he is, goes vengeful, and basically maybe plants a virus in the software that leads to the other robots going south as well, and he's on a mission to find the architect, the creator. Is that what you're saying? Okay. What would
I almost feel like we're getting a little bit of inspiration from at least the previews that are out there for the HBO series, because Evan Rachel Wood's character features so prominently as one of the android characters, and we're questioning, how she views the world as well. And so maybe that's the same kind of remake mentality that Jonathan Nolan went with.
Hey, good job, Jonathan. I think we pointed you in the right direction, sir.
That's right.
I hope you can handle this. I mean, you did all right with Memento and whatnot, but
Memento was so good.
so good.
So, okay. So what would be, how would we do that? Would you have the creator? What do you guys think? Have the creator at the end of the movie, he would basically spill everything. It would be Exposition City, or would you prefer to have it where you're hearing the story as the android learns about it, as he stalks?
I think you have to dole it out as it goes along.
Okay. And what would our story be?
It's the realization, right? As he goes along, it's truly just the realization. He learns little bits and pieces, and maybe because of the virtual reality hooking up to him, maybe he's getting, I hate to say memories, but maybe he's getting flashes of stuff as he walks through the different parts of the park, like he's been here before. And because of that, that's really what drives him to come to the realization of who he is and finally realize, okay, I have been here before. I remember it now. I need to go find this guy. And then when he does find the guy, maybe the only exposition you have at the end is just, yes, I was your creator. You were made. You were prototype number one, or, we called you the MIBs or Man in Black or whatever you want to call it. And with that perspective, then I think that's where the movie really makes the turn, because at the end, at that vocal point right there, then the android has to make the choice. Do I kill my creator or do I let him live? And that's that struggle that really defines whether or not he's truly human or not, in a way.
Well, I'm kind of worried because we don't really have a human consequence other than the director of Westworld or whoever's in charge, or even some low flunky, like I mentioned earlier, who maybe created this prototype. So what's the consequence for the guests? I mean, how do the guests come in if this is our story?
That might be from an angle of, if you want to think of it from a hedonistic point of view, maybe it's the whole, because you chose this path and you hate to get religious on it in a way, but maybe that is the conflict, right? You decided to come do this instead of being good citizens, doing your job, doing whatever, and you decided to go out, live out your fantasy. So when you live out your fantasy, there's consequences for those choices.
Well, is there going to be a guy who goes along the journey with the android, maybe, who has an awakening because of what this AI is going through? Because otherwise, I think you need some kind of human element to not only show us how the hedonistic ways have consequences, like you said, but also give the android a little bit more of a sounding board, or someone who we can see through their eyes at the android's experience.
The android meets somebody on the tram or train or jet or whatever the hell it is that gets us there. And at that point, he befriends somebody and they become friends, and they end up going through part of this experience themselves until things start going south. And the human, John Blaine, would question the whole entirety of the park and the whole moral conflict of this park. And is it wrong? Is it bad? Is it? And then as he sees that this friend that he befriended it actually is an android, and what he's going through, he understands his plight, even though he doesn't agree with it. And he goes off on I don't know. He realizes that it's wrong, but he also doesn't want all of these guests to die. So you do have a human trying to stop something. But I also think maybe he doesn't succeed.
Yeah, I think maybe he meets a tragic end at the 11th hour of the movie.
Yeah, well, he's trying to save the creator, and after the creator bites it, then you think the hero's going to make it out, and then our android basically would take out that person and then would resume production of the park as his own. Like, he would take up the mantle of the creator.
What if?
Oh, really?
I hate to use the word, but what if it was a three-way? In the sense that maybe as they're going through the experience, and the human has this point of view of why did you create this place where all this hedonistic stuff could take place, maybe as they journey together to find the original creator, maybe the human struggles with, should I kill the creator or not, and actually does. The android figures out, hey, that was my creator, and from a humanistic perspective then says, I love my father, and then he ends up killing the human. And so it's kind of like a shock ending at that perspective. And then, like you said, the android takes over and builds a more
that's a
perfect place
tough
for the
choice.
androids.
That is a tough choice. I don't know which one I would want, the tragic ending for the maker or the tragic ending for the human companion. Or both.
I want tragic for both. But
I'm kind of what I was going with.
I'm kind of dark. I guess.
And then a camera angle from below as we look up at the android bathed in blood.
Troy, can you recap just real quick, like what your element of the creator and the android? I guess I'm a little fuzzy on that.
Well, just that the creator might have been the one that created the androids originally, and maybe this was like, it's always like whenever you see those movies like iRobot or Almost Human, right? It was a previous version,
right? And
that previous version seemed to have too much humanistic qualities to it.
Mm-hmm. Too much humanity.
Too much humanity. And they scrapped that because it was too real. So they actually dialed it back a notch for the next generation. And so
in Almost Human, they had psychotic tendencies because they couldn't handle the emotions, and that would fit quite well with this idea.
Exactly.
Okay, so who wants to do a recap? Mike, can you recap all this?
Let's see if I can do it justice here. Okay, so Peter Martin, who it turns out is an android.
Yeah, sure, we can go with
I'm just calling him that.
Hey, it's a remake, so you know what? Use the names, then you're paying homage to him. So
exactly. He comes in with John Blaine, and they're on the tram, just like the hovercraft, the whole bit.
Mm-hmm.
And they end up in Westworld, where it's probably ramped up a little bit for our modern sensibility, not just the prostitute in the saloon, but also a lot more bloody encounters other than the gunslinger at high noon and the bank robberies and that type of thing. But as we are going through this journey, certain things start to manifest themselves, maybe some kind of glitch similar to the telltale hands that we saw in the original movie that allow Peter to realize that something's not quite right. Maybe, I guess, John Blaine upgrades to a virtual reality version, some kind of thing that introduces the virus or something that causes Peter's awakening to start. He starts to recognize different places behind the scenes, realizes he's been there before, follows the path to his maker, whom he confronts at the end, and things meet a bloody end as he wants humans to pay for their freewheeling ways. Is that I didn't want to say hedonistic again. I had been using that word too much.
No, it's a big word and I like it, so you can keep throwing that out all you can. I like that. That's a really cool idea.
And in the process, of course, John Blaine also realizes the error of humanity and tries to go through an awakening, but ends up getting caught up in the mayhem
and trying to save people.
Right.
And amidst all this, we do have a lot of people that die, correct?
Yeah. And a love interest maybe somewhere in there, stuff like that.
Yeah, love interest. We don't need that in every movie. Plus you got prostitutes. He loves the prostitute. Whatever. And Peter Martin basically becomes the gunslinger, right? Correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's
So, and we do want him to wander through at the end, like as he's on his way to find the creator, he wants to wander through the other worlds. You want like a prehistoric world? I've got a spy world. You got anything, Troy?
I had Samurai World or
Samurai
Mongolian
World. Okay, so we wander through all three. That would actually be kind of fun. And then, all right, I think we got a movie, guys. Unless somebody wants to add something else.
No, I think that was very agreeable. No cuts.
Oh, Troy's still waiting. We're not done yet. We're not.
Maybe he'll cut the director's choice or something like that.
Who would you want to direct this obvious masterpiece?
Yeah.
Mike?
Well, I would put it in the capable hands, not only for directing, but writer-director Alex Garland of Ex Machina fame. Because he could take our story and bump it up a few notches and also do a pretty kick-ass job of directing it as well.
Man, I think we might have just picked him for something else, but you know what? Directors direct more than one movie. I like Alex Garland. What do you think, Troy?
Alex Garland could be our 1970s remake master.
Absolutely. That's fine. We're all on board.
Did you choose him in an earlier podcast? No, I just missed that one.
No, we just it actually hasn't come out yet, but I think it was Logan's Run. Was it Logan's Run?
Yes.
Okay. We picked him for that one. That's okay. This guy's the guy. So he needs more science fiction reality. Whatever this genre is, he needs more of that.
Plus the fact that he's a screenwriter too. I mean, I think that is definitely needed in something like this.
Oh, and Ex Machina is just a beautiful, beautiful movie. Okay, so characters. So we've got the gunslinger, who's basically Peter Martin, and we can either maybe recast the creator or John Blaine, his human companion. Which one would you guys prefer to? What do you guys have? What's your idea for gunslinger? I guess Troy, you got anybody?
Well, I was thinking like Franco Nero from
yes,
Django Unchained.
Franco Nero.
Is he bald?
Not that
that's necessary.
Which one is he in Django Unchained? He's 74 years old.
Then we'll pass.
He's pretty up there. How about a different one? How about a younger, more stable guy?
Goggins. Say in the same movie, go with Walton Goggins.
Walton Goggins again. I got an idea, and hear me out, okay? Because I know the first reaction is gonna be like, eh. But my idea is you have a character who he needs to be like relatable. He needs to be kind of cool, but he also needs to be somebody the audience can get behind. But also when he flips, he needs to be just somebody that feels threatening, right? Because he's going to be the gunslinger. My idea, and I know he's not a thespian in many respects, is Vin Diesel.
I have Vin Diesel in my notes. No joke.
Do you really?
Yes, but this was before we combined Peter Martin and the gunslinger, because I have Joseph Gordon-Levitt as Peter Martin, and that would never work for the gunslinger.
It'll work for the other character, though.
But I totally have Vin Diesel written down for gunslinger. That's so funny.
Oh, I'm a big fan of that idea. So if you still feel like it, I think that's two.
Yeah. That is the rule.
That is the rule.
That is hilarious.
So if you're good with it, you got to say you're good with it, though. Are you good with it?
I'm good with it.
All right. Now, John Blaine could be Joseph Gordon-Levitt, or
I actually have Carl Urban down for John Blaine, but he might be overused at this point.
Is there such a thing? I don't know.
I don't know if the screen
There's
test
no too
chemistry
much
works
Carl
there.
Urban.
That what?
Well,
that what,
that's true.
Troy?
The screen test chemistry between the two of them, I don't know if that works.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think he's got... Actually, yeah, that does. I mean, they were in Riddick together.
Were they really?
They were in Chronicles of Riddick together.
I totally didn't even think of that. That's true.
So they totally have some chemistry. I can't believe I almost let that slip. Chronicles of Riddick, man. Carl Urban was the guy.
Not to mention there's the Dread connection for
Alex Garland.
Because yeah, exactly.
I
must be subconsciously making these connections.
I'm in. I had Rami Malek from Mr. Robot just because I thought he was a real awkward and as far from a cowboy as I could imagine. But I like Carl Urban. That seems like because rough and tough, and he can play humanistic. I mean, he can play humanity. So
and plus, if that would be almost taking the Mr. Robot thing too literally if you stuck that in there.
True. What do you think, Troy?
Yeah, no, I'm good with that.
All right. Are there any nostalgic moments we got to have in this bad boy at all? Like nods to the original movie? I mean, I had the crystal eyes. That's really all I had.
I think you have to have the interview segment at the beginning where everyone's being interviewed cheesily.
Totally.
Yes. Okay.
Agree.
Sold. Okay. Well, we've got one more clip. Let's play that before we do our final pitch.
How was it? Wasn't it terrific? Boy, machines are the servant of man. Wasn't that great? Not bad. Not bad. Now you're the big lover.
Well, you know how it is. Some guys have a way with women.
Shooting stopped. I guess we missed the robbery.
You can't have everything. John, this place is really fun.
As you know, we love to present our movie in the greatest way possible as the audio movie trailer, a dying art form, and nobody does it better than one Mr. Wayne Henderson from MediaVoiceovers.com. I think this one's going to be really good. He's going to top himself from our Independence Day remake. Why don't you take a listen? Take it away, Wayne.
Dallas is the vacation of the future today. Have you ever dreamt of a life as a cowboy in the Old West? Maybe envisioned yourself as more of an outlaw, on the run and always living in the moment. Welcome to Dallas, and boy, have we got a vacation for you. Here in the Westworld section of Dallas, you can live your life just as those gunslingers did at the beginning of civilization. You can even meet fellow travelers like Peter Martin. Peter's a nice guy and a first-timer here at Westworld, and you can just tell by looking at him what a great time he's having at the park. Wait, are his eyes glowing? Nah. You also have season ticket holders like John Blaine here. John has seen all there is to see at Westworld proper, so he's taking advantage of our advanced virtual reality capabilities and going even further into the reality. Everyone loves Dallas, and Westworld is the #1 attraction. Guys, what was that screaming? Sorry about that. Where was I? Right. Everyone loves Dallas and our #1 attraction. So next summer, pack your bags and come on over to Westworld. Before we come for you.
Hey, good job. Good job, Wayne.
That was
awesome.
Good. Yeehaw, partner. Yeehaw. Okay, so that's gonna do it. I think we nailed it. I don't know. I think we nailed it. HBO should be worried, is what I'm saying.
It's exciting.
Yeah. It sounds like a really cool idea.
And it has a purpose.
Oh God.
Yes, exactly. There's a reason for the evil.
There's a reason for the evil.
Did you have fun, Mike? Did you enjoy doing this?
Oh, I totally did. That was a lot of fun. I always participate vicariously in listening to the podcast, but fun to throw my own ideas in there too. And I'm glad they were met with receptiveness.
Absolutely. And you should come back and do another one sometime. You're a busy guy. You've got a lot going on. But where can people find you? Where can people find your vocal stylings, your writings, etc.?
Well, I'm on Twitter at Mike Sci-Fi, and I'm on Golden Spiral Media doing a lot of podcasts there, but you can find me on Den of Geek. Just search for Michael Ahr. I'm reviewing Dark Matter at the moment. I'll be reviewing Cinemax's Quarry in the fall, which I'm looking forward to. And hopefully people can spot me on there and agree with my reviews, hopefully. Make some comments in the comments area.
What is Quarry? I don't know that one.
It's not a genre show. That's probably why, but it's a reluctant hitman who returns from Vietnam very disillusioned and gets pulled into a life of crime, a la sort of a mixture of Breaking Bad and Fargo, a sprinkling of each of those types of shows. It looks to be a lot of fun.
That sounds great, actually.
Yeah, it comes out in late September.
And Troy, where can people find you?
Usual places. Just go to about.me/Troy Heinritz. You'll see the entire resume there. But obviously, the blacklistexposed.com is the big show. Come check us out for season 4. We got some interesting stuff happening there. And I will keep going on with this goofball on the other side of the mic as we go beyond Westworld at beyondwestworldpodcast.com as we start talking about the HBO television series. Cannot wait.
What if you could live your life without limits, where every desire you ever imagined could be fulfilled? This fall, experience Westworld, a show where every human's dark side will be revealed. After watching each episode, listen to Beyond Westworld, a podcast featuring humans and hosts from around the park, diving deep into HBO's illustrative narrative. Every hero has a code, and so do you. Download your itinerary and the show at beyondwestworldpodcast.com or your podcast app of choice.
And we'll see if they can measure up to this movie. I'm just letting you know. If anybody wants to slap Michael Ahr and Troy Heinritz and Aaron Peterson on the story body credits, we're cool with it.
That's right.
Do what you got to do. Okay, and don't forget Wayne Henderson, mediavoiceovers.com, mediavoiceovers.com. And you can find Remake This Movie Right at remakethismovieright.com. We're on Twitter at RemakeRight, and our email is remakethismovieright@gmail.com if you think you have a better idea, better pitch, or you think we totally blew it. Either way, whatever you find. Please share the show with your friends, Facebook, Reddit, social media, whatever social media it is you use. Troy, why don't you please take us out?
Sure. Remember, every movie that you've seen from the 70s, 80s, or 90s will get a remake someday, but only you can make it better. Take care, everybody.
I think they're remaking movies that came out last year now.
Seems like it.
Exactly.
I mean, Spider-Man's on like the 3rd or 4th remake, so.
The Turtles are out there, too.
Ignore the other Spider-Man. We got a better one.
Yes.